May 10th, 1945, a cold rain falls on a broken German town near the Rhine. The streets still smell of smoke, wet stone, and the sharp tang of fear that is soaked into the cobblestones over 6 years of war. Women in torn coats push exhausted children forward through the drizzle. They have been ordered to report to the schoolhouse on the hill, where American conquerors are waiting. For years, the radio voices told them the same thing, over and over, until the words became gospel. If the Americans come, they will destroy you. Rape, torture, starvation. Better to die fighting than fall into their hands. But now, at the foot of that muddy hill, the wind carries a different message entirely. Not words, but smells. Strong coffee. Hot meat stew. Fresh bread rising from American field kitchens set up in the square below. 12-year-old Anna watches her starving mother collapse in the mud, too weak to climb the slope, and waits for the enemy soldier approaching them to shout, to strike, to prove every radio broadcast right. Instead, the young American soldier in the rain-soaked uniform does something that will shatter everything she has been taught about monsters and mercy. He kneels in the mud beside Liesel, lifts the German woman gently onto his back, as if she weighs nothing at all, and begins to carry her up the hill like she is someone precious. "Why are you carrying my mother?" The girl cries out, her voice cracking with anger and something deeper, something like hope she is terrified to feel. And in that moment, standing in the rain on a ruined German hillside, everything the Reich told her about enemies begins to crack and fall away like old plaster from bombed walls. If you want to know how this one act of simple kindness changed a German family, reshaped an entire town's understanding of the war, and helped transform bitter enemies into unlikely allies, stay with me through this story. It is not the one the history books usually tell, but it is the one that mattered most to the people who lived it. The girl's name was Anna. She was 12 years old, but felt ancient. Her town sat near the Rhine, half rubble and half memory now. Roofs gone, windows like empty eye sockets. When she walked to the communal water pump each morning, broken glass crunched under her worn shoes with each step. Inside their cellar room, the air never changed. Damp earth, coal dust, and the sour steam of watery soup made from potato peels and wilted cabbage leaves. Her mother Liesel boiled whatever scraps they could find in a single dented pot. Most days that was everything they had. By early 1945, many German civilians were subsisting on fewer than 1,000 calories daily. Anna could feel that deprivation in her bones, in the way her ribs showed through her dress, and how the stairs made her mother gasp for breath. In the corner of their cellar stood their most precious and most dangerous possession, a tall wooden radio, its cloth speaker torn and stained, but still functional. For years that radio had been their window to the world. Now it felt more like a cage. The voice that crackled from it was always certain, always loud, always wrong. First it had been Hitler himself, that harsh Austrian accent, promising final victory, even as the maps showed the Reich shrinking week by week. After his death in the Berlin bunker just days ago, other voices took over. Unknown officials with the same tone, the same fury, the same lies. They spoke of secret weapons coming soon, of cowardly enemies about to break, of the Americans as subhuman monsters. "Remember this," one announcer had said months earlier, his words cutting through the static like knives. "If the Yankees reach your town, they will take everything. They will violate your women. They will starve your children. Better to die as a German than live as their slave. Liesel had believed it. She had trusted the uniforms, the flags, the eagle, and swastika that flew over the town hall. With the ceiling trembling under distant American artillery that grew closer each night, she was no longer certain. Still, she repeated the warnings to Anna in the dark. "If the Americans come," she whispered while they huddled under thin blankets, "do not look at them. Do not speak. They are not like us." But the world outside their cellar told a different story with each passing day. The trains had stopped running. The post no longer came. Neighbors whispered of cities where 70% of buildings were simply gone, burned hollow by firebombs. Cologne, Hamburg, Dresden. Names that now meant ruins and ashes and thousands of bodies under rubble. One April evening, the radio voice changed completely. It was no longer loud and sure. It sounded tired, almost small, almost human. Anna and her mother leaned close to the speaker, shivering as the announcer read a short, trembling statement. "The Führer is dead. The German armed forces have surrendered unconditionally." The words hung in the cellar like cold smoke. Outside, no one cheered. There were no flags. Some people cried, others just stared at nothing. For years they had been told Germany would either win absolutely or be wiped from the earth. Now neither seemed true. The war was over, and they were still alive. But in what kind of world, and with what kind of conquerors? In the days that followed, food grew even scarcer than before. The ration office stopped opening. The officials simply vanished. People broke into warehouses hoping to find hidden stores. Most found only empty shelves and rat droppings. A loaf of bread, if you could locate one, might cost a whole month's wages in worthless Reichsmark notes. At night, Anna listened to adults whisper above her head. "Americans are across the river. They shot SS officers on sight, but they gave chocolate to a farmer's boy. It is a trick. First they feed you, then they use you." Her stomach twisted with each rumor. She did not know which frightened her more, the old story of monsters or the new story that the monsters might show mercy. Her father was somewhere far away, if he was anywhere at all. He had gone east with the Wehrmacht in 1943 and never returned. The last postcard said only, "Do not worry. We are being moved to the rear for rest." Then silence. Maybe he was dead in a muddy field in Ukraine. Maybe he was behind barbed wire. The radio never spoke of men like him. Sometimes late at night, Anna wrote in a tiny notebook she kept hidden under her blanket. Years later, she would still remember one line written by candlelight. "They tell us the Americans are devils. But if they are devils, why do they bring food in their tanks, not just shells?" It was a child's question, but it cut straight to the truth. Between the world the radio described and the world her empty stomach knew, something was terribly wrong. As the shelling faded and the sky grew strangely quiet, another sound rose in the distance. Engines, many engines, coming from the west. The ground began to tremble. Glass rattled in the few frames that remained. Liesel grabbed Anna's hand, her fingers cold and thin. "This is it," she said. "They are here." Every story the radio had planted, every nightmare it had cultivated seemed to climb those cellar steps with them as they emerged into the gray morning. What waited for them in the town square would match none of those stories. Not even close. The Americans came in a long steel column. From the eastern edge of town, Anna saw the first Sherman tank appear around the ruined church, wide and low, its tracks grinding broken stones into powder. Behind it came jeeps, trucks with canvas covers, more tanks. The smell reached them before the convoy stopped. Diesel fuel, hot metal, and something sharp and foreign from the soldiers' cigarettes. People emerged from cellars and shelters slowly, as if any quick movement might draw fire. Old men in threadbare coats, women with babies wrapped in blankets that smelled of damp and smoke, boys too young to have been conscripted into the Volkssturm. Somewhere a dog barked once and went silent. The soldiers were not what the radio had described. Not wild gangs drunk on conquest, but organized men who looked almost bored. Helmets low over their eyes, belts cinched tight, rifles pointed down at the cobblestones instead of at the crowd. Some chewed gum, their jaws moving in a rhythm that seemed almost disrespectful to the devastation around them. A jeep stopped near the church. An officer stood up, his coat somehow still clean despite the mud everywhere. Beside him rose a young German man in a civilian suit, hands trembling visibly. A translator, pulled from somewhere, maybe a prisoner, maybe a refugee, but he spoke English. The officer called out sharp words. The German repeated them in a voice that cracked with fear. All civilians must report to the main square. Bring identity papers. Bring children. There will be registration. There will be food. You must not hide. Stay calm. No one will be harmed if you obey. No one moved at first. Then a woman from the next street, her face gray and gaunt, whispered a single word like a prayer. Food. Slowly, as if pulled by an invisible rope, people began to walk toward the square. Anna held tight to Liesel's hand as they joined the flow. The square had once hosted weekly markets, farmers selling eggs and cheese under colorful awnings. Now its stalls were gone, the fountain broken, the stones blackened by fire. On one side, American trucks formed a wall. Big olive-green vehicles, each able to carry 2.5 tons of supplies. Later, Anna would learn that the U.S. Army had moved more than 11 million tons of food and equipment across Europe by war's end. At that moment, she only saw mountains of wooden crates. Soldiers jumped down and began to work with practiced efficiency. Some set up a perimeter of machine guns, barrels pointed outward to guard the square from any threat. Others unfolded tables taken from somewhere, laid them in straight lines, and set up large metal drums on tripod stoves. Within minutes, a new smell drifted over the crowd. Coffee, strong and bitter. Then fat sizzling, onions frying, something meaty bubbling in huge pots. Anna's mouth filled with saliva so fast it hurt. Her stomach cramped as if furious at the memory of real food. A girl beside her muttered, "It is a trick. They will feed us, then take us away." Her grandmother shook her head slowly, eyes on the soldiers distributing bowls. "If they wanted us dead," the old woman said quietly, "they have guns. They do not need soup." At the first table, an American sergeant called out numbers. A German helper repeated them. Each person who stepped forward gave a name, a birth date, showed whatever papers remained. In return, they received a small card with a number stamped on it. "Ration card," someone whispered. "For us, from them." At another table, soldiers opened crates with swift, practiced blows of crowbars. Cans clinked against each other. Meat, powdered eggs, vegetables in brine. In 1945, a standard American field ration provided 3,600 calories daily, more than 3 times what most Germans were eating. They did not hand out that much, of course. but still more than anyone expected. A ladle of thick stew with visible chunks of beef, a slice of white bread so soft it seemed impossible, sometimes even a small piece of chocolate, or a cigarette for the older ones. Anna watched a young soldier pause when a boy of maybe 6 stepped up to his station. The child's cheeks were hollow, his coat 3 sizes too large. The soldier glanced left and right, then quickly broke his own bread ration in half and slipped the extra piece into the boy's hand, closing his small fingers around it. The boy stared up, eyes enormous. The soldier gave a tiny shrug as if to say, "Don't tell." "This cannot be real," Liesel whispered beside Anna. "They bombed our bridges. They shelled our fields. Now they feed us meat." It was a jarring contrast. The same uniforms that had brought devastation to their town now serving thicker soup than most German kitchens had produced in months. The same army that had crushed the Wehrmacht now arguing among themselves because one man tried to keep extra supplies for his own unit instead of distributing them to civilians. An officer barked at him, pointed to the line of waiting Germans, and ordered the crates opened immediately. Later an old neighbor, Herr Kraus, would remember that day clearly. "I thought they would steal from us," he said. "Instead they guarded the bread from their own men who wanted seconds. That is when I knew something in our stories was wrong. Not all the Americans were kind, of course. Some looked at the Germans with flat, hard eyes and shoved bowls across tables without a word. One or two laughed too loudly, pointed at broken statues, took photographs, as if touring a strange ruined museum. But even the cold ones followed rules. No one looted the church. No one dragged women from the line. A few children received candy when officers were not looking. Why? Liesel kept asking under her breath. Why would they do this? Anna had no answer. She only knew that the stew was hot, the bread soft, and her hands trembled as she raised a spoon to her mouth. The taste was salt and fat and something smoky. It tasted of a world she had almost forgotten existed. When the meal ended, the German translator made another announcement. "Tomorrow you must all go to the school above the town. There will be more questions, more health checks. Those who are weak will receive extra rations. You must walk there in the morning." Anna looked up at the hill where the schoolhouse stood, its roof half collapsed, its yard a sea of churned mud. For her the walk would be manageable. For some, including her mother whose legs had grown so thin, it would not be easy at all. She did not yet know that on that muddy slope her entire understanding of enemies and mercy would be turned completely upside down. The truth was walking toward her in rain-soaked boots, and it would be carried on a stranger's back. The next morning the town woke to fog and steady drizzle. The hill to the school looked impossibly steep under the gray sky. Mud ran in thin streams down the ruts left by military trucks. Anna and Liesel left early, joining a slow procession moving upward. Liesel wore her only coat, far too large now, because she had lost so much weight. Before the war she had been strong, hauling flour sacks in her father's bakery. Now she weighed barely 45 kilograms. Her cheeks were hollow, her hands thin as twigs. They joined a line of ghosts moving through the rain. Old women with scarves knotted under their chins. Thin boys leaning on walking sticks. Mothers carrying babies wrapped in blankets that reeked of damp and old smoke. Later records would show that in some parts of occupied Germany, more than 40% of civilians were clinically underweight. Anna did not know that statistic. She only saw it in the way people walked, slow and shuffling like the old, even when they were young. The road turned sharply upward. Stones slipped treacherously under their shoes. The air smelled of wet earth and coal smoke from the few chimneys still working in town below. Somewhere behind them a truck engine coughed and died. A church bell rang once and stopped mid-tone. At first Liesel climbed steadily, breathing hard but not complaining, her hand heavy on Anna's arm. After a few minutes her steps grew shorter. Her boots sank deep into the slick clay. "Just a little more, Mama," Anna said, trying to sound brave. "We can rest at the top." "There is no little any more," Liesel whispered. "Everything is a mountain." Halfway up the muddy hill, her foot slipped. She fell to her knees, coat soaking through, breath coming hard. People ahead glanced back, then looked away. No one wanted to slow the line or draw the soldiers' eyes. "Get up, Mama," Anna begged. Liesel tried, using her bag like a cane, but sank back down. "Go on without me," she gasped. "Tell them my name." Boots squelched behind them. An American soldier passed, then stopped. He looked from mother to daughter, puzzled, not cruel. He said something Anna couldn't understand. She answered in German, too fast, heart pounding. The soldier shifted his rifle, crouched, and pointed. Liesel, his back, the hill. He waited. Shame and fear tangled inside Anna. The enemy touching her mother felt like betrayal, but he did not order. He only waited. "Help me up," Liesel said quietly. Together they lifted her onto his back. He stood easily, surprised by her lightness, and climbed at a steady pace. Mud sucked at his boots. Rain darkened his helmet. He did not complain. At the top he knelt so she could slide down. "Danke," Liesel whispered. He nodded and walked away. Inside the schoolhouse, Americans weighed people and stamped cards. Liesel's received red, marking extra food. It felt like winning a prize for starving. Weeks later, a mail truck came. Liesel received a thin letter from Texas. Her husband was alive, a prisoner in America, fed well, guarded by rules, coffee, bread, baseball, written laws. Enemies who carried mothers uphill and followed conventions. Anna finally understood the hill, the letter, the smile.